All the time I'm doing all this, I did not know how much God had been protecting me through all these things that I've been through. I grew up in a family that was not a Christian family, per se. My dad's mother was a Christian, but he didn't want to be part of that. And when he was 17, he left the farm in Minnesota and joined the Army and never looked back. And so we very seldom saw my grandmother. But the couple of times that I did, she always told me that she was praying for me. I didn't know what to think of that, and she gave me a Bible. So time went on, and I wound up moving to Phoenix, and wound up on the Phoenix Police Department, 1972. And I really enjoyed doing the work. And I started going kind of quickly, up a little bit, through the ranks a little bit. And I found myself very quickly, going into the Narcotics Bureau. We did search warrants and also did some buying, of drugs. And I only had 6 years on when I got there. And while I was there, I saw some of the worst parts of humanity that a lot of people don't even know about. And something just struck me in my head. It's like, what is? I mean, is this whole world just going to hell or something? It just started to work in my heart a little bit. There's like, I need to find out more about God, or why why this happens, to some people. And eventually, it started my investigation of who God was, or who He is. I was married at the time, and working in undercover like that, sometimes I'd be gone for 2-3 days at a time, so even my wife, who at that time, she told me once, you're gonna have to make up your mind. You want to be married to the job, or do you want to be married to me? Well, I already knew, the police officers have a high divorce rate, and narcotics officers are, twice as many divorce rate as everybody else. So I asked for a transfer to go back into to uniform patrol, and the Lord put me on a squad where there was one Christian officer and a Mormon officer. Well, I didn't know much about either one of them, at the time. I started investigating both, because I knew, they're supposed to have good family lives, and I wanted a good family life. I want to have a family. And well, it was during 1979 that we bought some property out in New River, about 10 acres, and found out that instead of buying a house in town for about the same amount of money, we could build a house on that 10 acres. Through my mother, who also lived out there, we found she knew a guy who was building houses. And we contacted him, and she said he seems to have a very reputable, good reputation, and decided to hire him. He could build a house, and little did I know, and I didn't know anything about construction work or anything, but there were some things that he did that were suspicious. He wanted to get a construction loan, but he wanted me to sign over the property to him. Fortunately, I had a sister-in-law who said, get a quitclaim deed, don't let it, at the same time you do that. Didn't understand why, but later learned that he did that with an FBI agent, that he wound up taking their property. And I started, during the construction, I started taking lots of photographs. Didn't know why, but it's like, I think I'll just to have a record of it. We got moved in early February of 1980. The house caught on fire, and we were, and the closest fire station was at I-17 in Bell Road, and it was a long way away. The real fire, and by the time they, 45 minutes to get out to the property, it was just, it was all burned practically to the ground. So it was a really bad day, that's for sure. And my wife at that time was really upset. All of our, everything we owned was there. And it was very important to us. There's another relative who was an insurance agent, even told us that new houses never burn down, So we'll just insure you for the amount of the mortgage and not what the value of the whole place is, So, well, so we only had about half the money we needed to rebuild, but we managed. And anyway, but in the meantime, figuring out how the fire started and the problems that I was having with the contractor, because after we got moved in, we discovered some other things that were done that he didn't take care of, and I started a complaint with the Registrar of Contractors office, and even called out the Sheriff's Department, because I believed that the guy had arsoned it, and after their investigation, it burned so thoroughly, there is no evidence left, to investigate. We can't prove that it was arson. If we say that it was arson, you're probably not going to collect your insurance. So we went with that, But I still believe this guy, because he turned out to be a shyster, and mentally I started thinking, I'm gonna kill this guy, and with already the stuff that I'd learned being a police officer, I think I could lie well enough to get away with it. I could make his body disappear somewhere. But God had other plans, and so I went back to work. The first thing was, when I pulled up in the parking lot, is that the Mormon officer came over and he said, "Hey, I saw the smoke coming up, out there, but I tried to find it. I tried to go out. I thought maybe I could save some things from your house." And I told him, "Well, thanks, but it was just too far gone anyway." But then when I went inside, the Christian officer said, "Hey, I've been praying for you for the last 8 days." And I said, "Well, right away," like, the only person that ever told me they prayed for me was my grandmother. This was totally unusual to me. And so we went out, and he asked me, to meet me for breakfast when I get out of here. So we went, and at breakfast he told me, he said, "I've also been reading the book of Job these last 8 days." And he said to me, he said, "Have you ever heard of Job?" I said, "Well, I like to fish a lot, and people say that I have the patience of Job when I go fishing, but other than that, I don't know anything about Job." So he proceeded to give me the Reader's Digest version of Job, and I didn't know it at that time, but the Spirit was working through me. God was working on my heart, and because I didn't tell those guys, anything. It was like what I was thinking, of course, because I wasn't sure if I wasn't going to still go through with it. And the more I investigated, it's like the thought just went away. So, after learning more, it's like, it was interesting to note that the Christian officer was concerned about my soul. So I continued learning. In fact, even that Christian officer gave me a pocket New Testament with Psalms and Proverbs in it, from Royal Rangers. And I carried that around in my uniform pocket with me all the time. And I didn't start going to church right away, but I was going to Christian bookstores. Like, well, what are people writing about the Bible, or what are they writing about God? One day, it was like it was in January of 1981. The lady who owned it, she finally just said to me, "You need to accept Jesus as your Savior." And it's like, I haven't heard this term before, So she says, "And you should do it right now." She grabs my hands and said, "Let's pray right now." And I'm in uniform, and I'm looking around. There's people in here. It's like, this isn't really weird. I really felt odd about doing that. And she gave me a piece of advice that I thought was, to this day, I think it was still really good. And she said, "You need to start going to church." She didn't suggest her church or anything like that. She just said, "You go visit a number of churches, and before you walk in that door, you pray, and you ask God to show you if this is where He wants you to be." And lo and behold, it wound up leading me back out to New River. There was a little New River Bible Chapel that was there. I started learning, more and more about, understanding the Bible even more and more. We wound up finding another church to go to, and it was a small, Baptist church, Pastor Shaw, and he had just started, Northwest Valley Baptist Church, and so I started going there in November of '87. Right away, even though he was a young man, 25 years old as I recall, but He was a good teacher right from the beginning, and he's still a good teacher. Been going here ever since, you know. Northwest Valley Baptist Church has been really excellent for me. First responders have problems like anybody else, and some, you know, I mean, because we all do see really horrible things, it definitely has made it a lot easier in my life, you know, to have Jesus there, you know, to give me comfort, you know, or to help me see why these things are happening. Ultimately, I know that, you know, in my life, you know, through all the things that I've been through, if it weren't for Jesus, I wouldn't even be here. And, you know, because God is incredibly gracious about, you know, knowing what's in a man's heart. At Northwest Valley, we praise the God that rescues us